Hi everyone, and welcome to week 3, I think it is, of using pathology in your naturopathic clinic practice. So today I'm going to talk to you about CDSA or poo and how we use poo to identify different things in your clients and how easy it is to be able to feel a bit more confident about knowing the specifics about what's going on in your client's bowel, because it's a really easy and awesome little test to use, and it's fairly comprehensive, and that's why it's called a CDSA, comprehensive complete digestive stool analysis. And what we want to make sure of is that your clients know exactly why they're using it, what the results mean for them, and how you can utilize it and feel a bit more confident in what you're going to be using as a protocol to help them out. So let's have a look. Today we are going to have a look at, first off, how to explain it to your clients. So I've had some feedback from a couple of practitioners that they've been utilising some of the things that I've been saying, which is awesome. I really, really want you to be able to use all the analogies that I use so that it's easier for your clients to understand what's going on. And so we're going to talk today about bowel and how I explain it to my clients, and how I explain how useful this test will be for them. Where you want to use food IgG analysis for food intolerances, or where you might want to be using CDSA, and then I'll give you 2 case studies. And if you have any questions at all, don't forget, pop your questions over in the chat box and I'll get to them at the end of each stage. So welcome everybody. It seems you're all joined all at the same time, or it's taken that little lag for everybody to catch up. So we're talking about CDSA, how to explain it to your clients, and how useful the information is. Alrighty, let me just open up what we've got today. And if you want to pop in the chat box anything like who you are and where you come from, that'd be really good, because it's kind of weird talking to myself. Alrighty. So this week all about CDSA, and I do CDSA level 2. There can be up to 5 levels depending on which pathology company you use. And I like CDSA 2 because it looks after the levels of, it'll tell you a lot about dysbiosis, it'll tell you a lot about pathogens, it'll tell you a lot about the fermentation within the bowel, and it'll also tell you about maldigestion or malabsorption. So it's got a handle on all of those things. What it doesn't tell you about is what the pathogens, if there is any pathogens that are in there, so that's yeast, parasites, bacteria, if there is any of those, what they will die from, so what they're sensitive to. And some companies use different antibiotics as well as different herbals to be able to let you know what they're going to be sensitive to. Hi Ruth, hi Michelle, great. So there's a couple of different things happening there with pathogens. There's a couple of different things happening there with maldigestion, and there's a couple of different things happening with fermentation, and we'll go through them. So how I explain everything to my clients. Let's see. Yes, alrighty. How I explain everything. Whoop, I've got a little bit of a lag today on my computer. How I explain everything to my clients is I use pictures. I'm a visual person, and it really depends on you guys and what you get triggered by and what kind of stays in your head as to how you would use it. But this is the picture that I use in my clinic to be able to explain in a very, very simple way. Yes, I understand it won't be completely 100% anatomically correct or physiologically correct, but for the general public to be able to explain and help them be empowered by their bodies, this is what I use. So I explained that your gastrointestinal system is a 12-metre long tube. So it's just like a big hose that goes from your lips to your bottom. And the thing about it is along that 12-metre long tube, if we were to cut it sideways and take a thing called a cross section, then we would find all of these different layers. Hi Melinda, hi Sharon, nice to see you guys, welcome. So when we cross section the gastrointestinal tract, what we find is the squishy zone on top, and this squishy zone acts like a force field. Underneath that squishy zone is the good and bad bacteria. So you can see the smiley faces and the kind of scary looking lines. So good and bad bacteria. And then underneath them is a layer of cells called enterocytes, or your gut cells. And then underneath them is your blood and this other stuff called lymph. And so inside your blood is where all of your immune system's doing its job, and it's also where all your wastes and toxins get taken out of as well, so all the good stuff gets passed around. So as you can see at the top, we've got good stuff going in. So in this picture, it's a diagram of apples. So we've got all the good vitamins and nutrients and all the things that we need from our food going in, and we want them to slowly go through this nice squishy zone that feels a lot like aloe vera. It's got that kind of texture, and it needs to go nice and slowly through that squishy zone so it can be broken down, and the good and bad bacteria help pre-digest it so that our enterocytes are able to absorb it, get all the useful stuff and pop it into our bloodstream for us. The bad stuff is supposed to bounce off this squishy zone, this force field, and those bad things are things like bacteria, viruses, allergies, intolerances, parasites and yeast. So just like the bad Chinese food that we've all kind of been exposed to, that there's things in there that our body shouldn't be exposed to, and we want to just poo that out rather than actually be affected by it and have food poisoning, for instance. So if our gut's working properly and it's up and ready and all of those layers are doing their jobs, then we shouldn't have a problem. But when I'm describing this to people, it's usually because they've got an IBS style issue. So they might have diarrhea and constipation. They might have skin conditions based on some of the things that they've told me that I might associate with gastrointestinal health as well. So they might have flatulence, bloating, different kinds of sounds in their gut. They might have indigestion or reflux. So all of those things, I would explain this to them, and definitely skin conditions as well. So the way I explain that is like we're like a big donut. The inside of us is the same as the outside of us. If you follow your skin all the way around your face, and you turn that little corner that goes into your mouth, there isn't any difference between the skin cells on the outside and the skin cells on the inside. They're still epithelial cells, but a bit further down, they change and get a bit more specific, and then we follow it all the way down to our bottom, and it turns that corner again and turns into your skin again. So it's all the same surface going inside and outside, except the stuff on the inside has mucus on it, and mucus needs water to be able to work properly. So one of the biggest things that force field needs is water. The other thing it needs is prebiotics or fiber, and without those things, that force field goes down. Other things that force field goes down with are alcohol, antibiotics, antihistamines, anti-inflammatories, antacids, analgesics, pain medication, changes in pH, dehydration and stress. So there's 10 different things scientifically proven to decrease that force field. Now, the little problem is, and this, again, I'm just explaining it the way I would explain it to my clients. I know you guys know all this stuff, but it makes it easier for them to be empowered by it. So if they're exposing themselves to any of these 10 different things, that force field goes down. If that force field goes down, all of those good bugs there that signed up for a great little condo full of life and wonderfulness, and then got this really dried up little rubbish condo that was falling around them, then they're out with the next poo. So if they're out with the next poo, then the things that they do and their function are out with the next poo, and they look after 4 major things. One is absorbing all your good stuff in, so you're missing out on absorbing all good nutrients. 2 is getting all the bad stuff out. They're really integral in getting some of the toxins out when it comes to that phase 2 and phase 3 of detoxification. They do about 30% of getting wastes out. So they're important for that. 3, they look after your immune system. 70% of your immune system is built there. And 4, they look after your neurotransmitters, the happy hormones that happen in your brain that keep you nice and balanced and happy. You know, when you've got the shits, you've literally got the shits. So when you've got a tummy that isn't working, your brain isn't working. So we need all of that bit to be happy. Like I was saying this, and I'm explaining to my clients. So force field up and running, we keep pummeling it with things it doesn't like, or it's got a pathogen that's been jumping in and out of it, then those good and bad bacteria aren't there. The problem we then have is that whole top layer, that whole yellow little happy smiley faces, they're all gone with the next poo. And all of those little, the cells that line our gastrointestinal lining tube, things that they wouldn't usually, that they usually have protection against. Good stuff that's in the cells, and all the bad stuff has an open opportunity to smash it. They become loose and to have things exposed to in our bloodstream. And so some of the things that we might have never had a problem with before, different foods we might have never had a problem with before, all of a sudden we have a problem with. They start to, it feels like we're intolerant to them, it feels like we're a bit sensitive to them, or we start to have reactions to foods that we weren't having reactions to before. And at this point in time, most clients will understand and make their own conclusions about what their gut is actually affecting in their system based on their symptoms, and they'll also be engaged and enrolled in the idea, okay, now what do I need to do about it? I get that, I've experienced that, I can feel that, what do I need to do about it? So what we then need to do is, oh, I'm dropping in and out. Okay, thank you for that feedback, guys. Let's have a look. Let me just turn up the volume. All right, is this any more useful? It's a bit better now. Great, Sharon. Excellent. Keep letting me know. So then we have all of those different layers. Everybody, all the clients are identifying different things for them, and then we need to identify which parts of this we can actually do some testing for. So the testing that I do, and this is based on GPs and local gastroenterologists who send people to me. They don't generally do these types of tests, although GPs can do this and they can get $60 off it based on the Medicare. So the first one shows that you're going to have an exposure to food intolerances, and that's the IgG testing. The second one, the one that we're talking about today, is CDSA, so it's complete digestive stool analysis. So this is the one that identifies whether or not those bad guys are there. So the little triangle up the top, we don't want any of those guys, they're pathogens. So we don't want any parasites, we don't want any nasty bacteria or opportunistic bacteria in too big a doses, and we don't want yeast. So we want to have a look at which ones are there, and nobody can just tell and make up in their head or X-ray vision what those particular pathogens are. And there's over 130 different parasites here in Australia that you would generally be exposed to. We usually see about half a dozen very regularly. And one of our case studies, I'll show you the main one that we see up here in Newcastle. So it really depends on where your clients have been exposed to, if they've been overseas, if they've had a history of being in rural environments, if they've drunk from rainwater tanks, or if they've had pets consistently, then that's the type of thing you'd want to be finding out specifically about, is the pathogens and the dysbiosis. If they haven't got any of those previous histories and they are having IBS types of issues, irritable bowel, different problems along their gastrointestinal tract, or they've found that they're quite sensitive to different foods, you're going to be looking at the maldigestion part of it and how they're digesting their food, as well as what they might be reacting to when it comes to food intolerances. So, any questions? Oh, I'm very glad that the sound is better. Thank you, Kathy, Sally, Melinda, for letting me know. All right, case one. So I'm going to cover two cases. First one's going to be, oh, well, we'll have a look. So again, I'm using HealthScope because I use them all the time. I noticed in the group yesterday we had lots of discussion around NutriPath and HealthScope and Research Nutrition and what's the other one? Advanced. So they're all doing the same tests. So they're all doing the macroscopic appearance. So again, my background, I used to do this, and you literally get a poo in a jar, and you pull it out, and you have a look at what it looks like. Is it fully formed? Is it semi-formed? Is it whatever it happens to look like? And then you pull it apart with tweezers, and depending on what you find, you have to put it under the microscope and then check out what's actually in there. They all do their same set of testing. Some of them batch these, so they do them in one big hit, and some of them keep them for longer. So sometimes you'll see, particularly the discussion that was being had, as HealthScope is a little bit slow on some things like hormonal profiles in particular, I've found. CDSAs, they have a fairly good 10-day turnaround, but and they have to be like that. You've got to actually grow some of the bugs on here as well. And it's literally like growing a plant. It takes a while. You've got to feed them the right things, and then they grow, and you're able to measure how much of them have grown. And then you're able to identify which particular species it is when it gets big enough to take a swab of it. So you've really got to make sure that's why things are taking their time when it comes to these pathology tests. Okay, so macroscopic. What does it look like when you take the poo out of the jar? So the fibres, are there fibres? And in this case, this client of mine, she had fibres. She is a 39-year-old female, and she came with a history of food sensitivities. She believed food sensitivities, and she would often get substantial bloating and constipation. So when you're looking at these, you've got to take into account their clinical history. It's not just a set of numbers by themselves. So after we've looked at the macroscopic appearance, what does it look like? It's fibrous. She hasn't been actually digesting all her food because there's food remnants in there. Then what does the microscopic look like? So they would have literally seen a whole piece of corn or a whole piece of carrot or whatever it happens to be, and that's why it's macroscopic. Microscopic, so if you were to pull apart a piece of the poo and have a look underneath the microscope, then you would look at the fibres that you find there. And in her case, there wasn't any fibres found there. So macroscopically, so she had whole portions of food, but microscopically, they weren't being partially digested or anything like that. Then we go down to the short-chain fatty acids. So short-chain fatty acids are the breakdown products of carbohydrate. So carbohydrate gets pulled apart into a series of smaller little units, and these little units have an association with which breakdown products you've got. So we need to make sure that we've got a nice spread of those, because you want to be making sure that all of the different carbohydrates that you have are being broken down. If one's not being broken down, then we start to have an issue with certain breakdown products like acetate if it's too low, or propionate if it's too high, or butyrate if it's too high as well. So I'll get into that a little bit more in towards the end. But as we're going down here, you can see that her fermentation of carbohydrates is a little off. Then we go further down, and we want to make sure that the pancreas is doing its job, because that's another place where you are pulling apart carbohydrates. So the pancreatic elastase that's left in her stool, is that working or is that not? And yes, it's working. And then further down, to make sure that the symptoms that she's having aren't actually caused by a parasite, we want to make sure that there's no ova, so no eggs, no cysts, or no whole parasites detected in a wet prep, which means it's been fermented and made in a solution, in a concentrate. So if we were to get it off a swab, or in a fixed smear. So if we were to look under a microscope at it, if we found any Cryptosporidia or Giardia. Giardia is one of the big ones in Australia because it's found in water tanks, especially up the north coast. So did I say somebody from the north coast before? Foresters Beach, yeah, you'd have Giardia in the water tanks up there. Wollongong, Mornington. Oh, it's so lovely to see everybody from everywhere, and Canberra too. Awesome. So, and then we've got the cultures. So we need to, cultures are the bacteria, and you want to be making sure that these bacteria, this is the problem and why it takes so long for a CDSA to get back. They actually put the poo on a plate of a petri dish and feed that poo, or the bacteria on that poo, different things. And so depending on what bacteria they're expecting to grow, you're going to have different amount of sugars, you're going to have different types of sugars, and they're going to grow different things. So to grow the levels of beneficial bacteria, Enterococci, E. coli is as long as it stays within a certain range, is an opportunistic bacteria and commensal, and bifido and lacto. And you can see here her bifido and her lacto are really low. So her beneficial bacteria, even though we've been giving her probiotics for a good month or so, they weren't actually sticking because of, as you can see in the comments below, and this is the cool thing about HealthScope, they do give you some decent clinical kind of indicators at the bottom, is that the reason that they weren't sticking there is because her prebiotics, her dietary fibre, just wasn't there for them to feed off. So we can see that back here, because they're all, there was such a low amount of short-chain fatty acids. So the fermentation is happening, but the actual fibre itself wasn't in there. And you could tell that from, again, her clinical case. So her clinical case was that she was quite constipated. And looking at her diet, there was a whole bunch of different things that we could do from a fibre perspective. And so when I was explaining it to her, I went back to the picture. Sorry to flick you in and out of pictures. I explained the picture that the top layer wasn't doing its job properly. We didn't have any of the bad guys up the top, but we didn't have a lot of the stuff that was happening in the middle there. So all the good guys couldn't stay there. If the good guys couldn't stay there, then we were having good food coming down and not being able to be fully digested properly. So, as you can see in the comments section, it also mentions that that there is a possible lack of prebiotics and or slow transit time or constipation, which she does have. Her increased acetate may be indicative of decreased relaxation of the blood vessels in the large intestine, or an imbalance of anaerobic organisms in the gut. And as you can see, there's a slight imbalance of those, but we don't have any bad bacteria in there. We need to make sure that she's got enough probiotics. Elevated food remnants may indicate maldigestion. So we also talked about, obviously there was large food portions and there wasn't smaller food portions. So we talked about how she was eating, the lifestyle factors around her sitting down, eating, chewing in particular. So as much as it's a really easy thing to go, okay, it'd be great if it was a parasite, for instance, then we can just kill it. Often it's these complex little nuances that come into the gastrointestinal kind of side of things that you can really tell when these types of results come back. She also had a decreased N-butyrate, which may indicate elevated alkaline pH, a reduced transit time, which is obvious because she had constipation, a lack of prebiotics, which we talked about with her diet, a lack of probiotics, which wasn't the case, it was just they didn't have anything to feed on, dietary fibre, and we needed to investigate further. So we also sent her off to her doctor. She'd had a colonoscopy done about 2 years prior. She got another one done, and all was well there. So the things that we helped her with was lifestyle-orientated things around chewing, sitting the time, and then also talked about dietary fibre. And we also talked about looking after that top layer. So I used a supplement. We get exposed to lots of different supplements. I used a supplement that contains aloe vera and slippery elm and turmeric and that kind of stuff. So that yellow layer was looked after so that the probiotics could live because of the prebiotics in there. And we also did some enzymes. So we did some bromelain and quercetin and some other things, and that was resolved. So it was really great that there wasn't a parasite in there and we didn't have to do that, but there was a whole bunch of other lifestyle factors in there. So again, if you've got any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Case 2. This one is a doozy, bless. So this is a young boy that we've had recently, and again, going through, we go, okay, macroscopic, everything's fine. Microscopic, oh look, everything's fine again. Short chain fatty acids and yes, Melinda, that was the product. I don't want to get in trouble for mentioning a certain product over another product. There's all sorts of different products out there, and they all have a very similar effect. But yeah, I do have my favorites because they just seem to work clinically. And yes, that's right, Melinda. It was that one. So short chain fatty acids in this particular case are completely fine. So I was worried again it was a maldigestion issue for this young boy, and that he was going too fast and wasn't eating. And his diet is immaculate. They have such a phenomenal amount of probiotics and such a phenomenal amount of fermented foods, and they're a plant-based whole food family. So I was hoping he was just gulping his food, but as you can see, that's all working perfectly. But when we look on the next page, again, no maldigestion issues, but yeah, we have a wacky doodah set of parasites in there, bless. So the levels of parasites go from 1+, 2+, and 3+. And so if you got 3+, they're everywhere. So yes, he's got Blastocystis hominis and Dientamoeba fragilis. So blasto is really well known in Australia. Blasto is kind of everywhere, and it's an absolute bugger to get rid of. It hangs around, and it does like to hang out with some friends, and one of those friends is Dientamoeba fragilis. So Dientamoeba there's been big outbreaks in places like India and kind of the third world countries where dysentery's kind of happened. You've got serious bowel kind of issues, and I notice it a lot with kids, especially young boys that have the squirts, or they don't quite have fully formed poos and things like that. But because this young man's diet is so good, it's hiding the fact that he's got these parasites in there. So the reason that his mum brought him along was because his behaviour goes in cycles. So every 3 weeks or so, and bizarrely enough, that's a cycle of a parasite. You might remember it from your studying days, where we probably studied the liver fluke or something along those lines, which we never get in our systems. But the life cycle of it in biology is the one that we use for oh, sorry about this. I'm getting sidetracked. So the life cycle of it is around about a 3-week cycle. So what happens there is that that you have the ovum, and then you have the juvenile, and then the juvenile goes and invites all of its friends over and has a big party, and then that big party blows out into a whole bunch of new adults growing and having a party. And then we have the disruption along the gastrointestinal tract and a disruption of the neurotransmitters. So then we have a little kid who's having these big, whoa, crazy days for about a week while he has die-off, and they go through that cycle again as the adults leave all their eggs around, and all those eggs go into hiding and everything gets calmed down again. And so depending on the particular parasite, then you may have 3-week cycles, you may have 3-month cycles, you may have, so it really depends on which parasite it is. But in the case of dientamoeba, they do come in cycles, so you've got to kind of keep a lookout for cycles of behaviour and cycles of skin conditions as well. Next, we want to find out about his good bacteria, and his good bacteria, his commensal bacteria obviously don't have a lot of opportunity to grow and take place and sit in those condos that we were talking about, because there's these rampant little bugs running around stealing all their food and stealing all their condos. And then the last one there is other organisms. So the Klebsiella that they found in there, it's depending on what studies you read, Klebsiella can be a commensal, but when it gets to a stage where it's detectable like this, or 1+, 2+, or 3+, then I get a little worried. And again, Klebsiella usually hangs out with dientamoeba, they're mates. So to look after these, we want to make sure that we're doing a weed seed feed kind of protocol. And in my case, and I know this is going to be very, very controversial, and that's okay. It's just the way that that I practice, and you don't have to. Because of my background, and I know how difficult blasto is to get rid of, and I know what a disruption this is to this child in particular's family, I've suggested that we work with the local GP to find an antibiotic to kill what we've got going on in there and start a clean slate. And so if we were to kill all of those and give him an antiparasitic to kill all of these bad bugs, get it back down to a baseline, then we can heal from there, heal and seal from there. And that's what I've chosen to do. And I've seen it happen before, that it's worked wonders. And so from a behaviour perspective, oh, and he's also got weeping wounds on his hand. I forgot about that. And they won't heal. So yeah, that's what I'm intending on doing. So as you can see in the results, it mentions that the lactobacillus, the bifido, and the E. coli aren't there, but the parasites are. Alrighty. So any other questions? I'm open to answering questions. So the healing and sealing that I would be doing, because his family are so fantastic using fermented foods, so kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut, kimchi, they have an amazing amount of those. He already knows his intolerances, so we steer clear of gluten for him. And he's also got an amazing amount of plant and fibrous foods in his diet. I don't have to look after a lot of that, but what I'd be doing is using a couple of different products. One from a large company that we've got that might have some stuff in it for kids in particular, to make sure that the die-off effect goes through. So it has a little bit of, no, Melinda, he didn't have any warts, but he has skin tags. So the die-off effect, we don't want that to be a big problem. So there's a product that is quite tasty for kids, and it has some Mary Sissel in it and some other gut relieving types of things in there. And I'd be definitely putting in a probiotic. I'd be using something like Polybac 8 or the Ultrabiotic 45 to get those numbers back up and get them looked after. Sharon, can you get any hints of SIBO from the CDSA? Yes. Yeah, so back on Sorry, there. So yes, when you've got, you'll have different levels of other organisms. So the other organisms are the ones that you want to be looking at, and often you'll get all sorts of different things in there. It really depends. And then on top of that, the way that the short chain fatty acids end up being, they're broken down by the bacteria that are in and along the bowel. So if they're out, then often the case is that you look further down and you make sure that there isn't any of these others. So we get all sorts of things in there. Many different species of candida as well can be in there, and depending on how they're breaking down the fermentation products, then you'll get all sorts of different things happening in there. Alrighty. What other things can I tell you about here? So things that I use this for, things that I would use this for are looking at indigestion, gas, bloating, IBS, constipation, diarrhea, reflux, malabsorption, inflammatory bowel diseases. I'd be looking at family history of bowel cancer with these types of things. I'd also be looking at behavioural disorders, all the alphabet disorders in kids, autism spectrum. I'd also be looking at long-term fatigue, history of sensitivities, allergies. I'd also be looking at immune system dysregulation, the skin conditions I was telling you about, liver stuff where we've done liver stuff before, but the shift hasn't happened in the gut. I'd also be looking at toxicity kind of stuff, and yeah, that kind of thing. Is there a bigger advantage in doing a 3-day stool test to a level 2? Depending on what your differential diagnosis is, would really depend on where you would use a 3-day or a level 2. So if you've got all these generalized kind of symptoms and you're not certain as to whether or not it could be from maldigestion, so them not either ingesting their foods correctly and absorbing their foods correctly, or you might think it's from the way in which they are digesting further down, or the different types of bugs in there, then a CDSA2 is like a broad spectrum kind of thing. You're going to have a look at all of those different things. The 3-day stool test is more if you get those types of, if you have that type of conversation where they've grown up on a farm, or every year they go holidaying on a farm, they drink out of rainwater tanks, for want of a better term, tree huggers, people who spend a lot of time outdoors, camping, being around trees, that kind of stuff, drinking from streams. If they've got a big history of being around animals or farm animals, or their own pets, and if they've been overseas, or they've specifically if they've come back or had barley belly or gastrointestinal symptoms whilst they've been overseas, or just after they've been overseas. So that's a really classic kind of blasto kind of thing where, oh, I remember I had this big hit of it and it hasn't been the same since. So if there's those types of things, the 3-day parasitology is definitely the way to go. You could really use this for any symptom picture. That's true, Melinda. So the CDSA it can be used for all sorts of things. The cost of the test is $220, but it ranges depending on which. It depends on which company you use. They can go between $200 to $320 depending on which company you use, and some of them add just little tests to it. So there's one other biochemistry test in the NutriPath one. So other breakdown products. So it's just another enzyme that they're able to test. So they add different things to try and be a little bit different, but it's all within the same sample. How would you use HealthScope CDSA over bioscreens testing, which is heavily promoted in my... At the moment I do, sorry, Carla, at the moment I do use HealthScope CDSA over bioscreens testing, but it's just because that's what I use. I haven't extensively used bioscreens. I've used it once. Turnaround time is, you know, is a thing, and cost is a thing, but yeah, it's just to give you an idea that there's lots of stuff out there, and there's lots of stuff available, but you can use them in whichever form you want, but it's going to give you a lot more confidence in the types of things you're able to explain to your clients, and it's nothing to be scared of. If you want to use bioscreens, go right ahead. If you want to use Nutripath, go right ahead. Give them all a go. It's whatever works for you, and it's really empowering for you and for your clients as well. Especially if you know, I'm just not sure that this protocol is working. I'm just not sure why the weed, seed and feed hasn't worked. I'm just not sure why. And there's these little stickling things in your mind. Definitely give it a go. So further from that, so next week we're going to do, oh no, not going to do general pathology. Next week we're going to do the salivary hormone testing and cortisol. So that's really exciting. It's one of my favorite things to talk about because I've got so many adrenally fatigued clients, and I've used it in all sorts of formats with women with period types of issues, women with hormonal types of issues, women with different types of things happening in different stages of their lives. So we're going to make sure that we've got those covered, and the week after that I'm going to very shallowly delve into cryptopyrroles and MTHFR for all the peeps that are listening to me because of the alphabet disorders and autism and things like that. So yeah, so we've got salivary hormones and cortisol next week, and the two tests that I use for behavioural stuff. So if you want to find me any more outside of what we're doing every Wednesday, you can find me at tammyguest.com. That's where I help entrepreneurs with adrenal fatigue in particular. At inspirationalhealth.com.au, that's my clinic. That's where we've got everybody here that I mentor, as well as the local community that we help. And inspiremybusiness.com, where you can find me mentoring other naturopaths in their business and their clinical cases. So thank you guys so much for listening again. I hope you guys have got a lot out of this. And if you feel that you have, please, please, please share the replays with anybody that you think would benefit from them, because the more we feel confident and happy as a community of health practitioners, and the more information that's available, the more we can empower our profession as a whole, and the more we can empower our clients. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next week for salivary hormones. All right.